where we've been blind. He's given us the chance where we've been lost to find our best selves. We may not have earned it, this grace, with our rancor and complacency and short-sightedness and fear of each other. But we got it all the same. He gave it to us anyway. He's once more given us grace. But it is up to us now to make the most of it, to receive it with gratitude, and to prove ourselves worthy of this gift. For too long, we were blind to the pain that the Confederate flag stirred in too many of our citizens. It's true, a flag did not cause these murders. But as people from all walks of life, Republicans and Democrats, now acknowledge, including Governor Haley, whose recent eloquence on the subject is worthy of praise. As we all have to acknowledge, the flag has always represented more than just ancestral pride. Yes, sir. For many, black and white, that flag was a reminder of systemic oppression and racial subjugation. We see that now. Removing the flag from this state's capital would not be an act of political correctness. It would not be an insult to the valor of Confederate soldiers. It would simply be an acknowledgement that the cause for which they fought, the cause of slavery, was wrong.
Yeah! It's wrong! Shoot!
The imposition of Jim Crow after the Civil War, the resistance to civil rights for all people, was wrong. It would be one step in an honest accounting of America's history. A modest but meaningful balm for so many unhealed wounds. It would be an expression of the amazing changes that have transformed this state and this country for the better because of the work of so many people of goodwill, people of all races striving to form a more perfect union. By taking down that flag, we express God's grace. But I don't think God wants us to stop there.
Praise it!
For too long, we've been blind to the way past injustices continue to shape the present. That's right. Perhaps we see that now. Perhaps this tragedy causes us to ask some tough questions about how we can permit so many of our children to languish in poverty, or attend dilapidated schools, or grow up without prospects for a job or for a career. Perhaps it causes us to examine what we're doing to cause some of our children to hate. softens hearts towards those lost young men. Tens and tens of thousands caught up in the criminal justice system. And lead us to make sure that that system's not infected with bias. That we embrace changes in how we train and equip our police so that the bonds of trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve make us all safer and more secure. Maybe we now realize the way racial bias can infect us even when we don't realize it. So that we're guarding against not just racial slurs, but we're also guarding against this subtle impulse to call Johnny back for a job interview, but not Jamal. So that we search our hearts when we consider laws to make it harder for some of our fellow citizens to vote. By recognizing our common humanity, by treating every child as important, regardless of the color of their skin or the station into which they were born, and to do what's necessary to make opportunity real for every American. By doing that, we express God's grace. For too long, we've been blind to the unique mayhem that gun violence inflicts upon this nation. Sporadically, our eyes are open. When 8 of our brothers and sisters are cut down in a church basement, 12 in a movie theater, 26 in an elementary school. But I hope we also see the 30 precious lives cut short by gun violence in this country every single day. The countless more whose lives are forever changed. The survivors crippled. The children traumatized and fearful every day as they walk to school. The husband who will never feel his wife's warm touch. The entire communities whose grief overflows every time they have to watch what happened to them happen to some other place. The vast majority of Americans, the majority of gun owners, want to do something about this. We see that now. And I'm convinced that by acknowledging the pain and loss of others, even as we respect the traditions and ways of life that make up this beloved country, by making the moral choice to change, we express God's grace. We don't earn grace. We're all sinners. We don't deserve it. But God gives it to us anyway. And we choose how to receive it. It's our decision how to honor it. None of us can or should expect a transformation in race relations overnight. Every time something like this happens, somebody says, we have to have a conversation about race. We talk a lot about race. There's no shortcut. We don't need more talk. None of us should believe that a handful of gun safety measures will prevent every tragedy. It will not. People of goodwill will continue to debate the merits of various policies, as our democracy requires. This is a big, raucous place America is. And there are good people on both sides of these debates. Whatever solutions we find will necessarily be incomplete. But it would be a betrayal of everything Reverend Pinckney stood for, I believe, if we allowed ourselves to slip into a comfortable silence again.
Right.
Once the eulogies have been delivered, once the TV cameras move on, to go back to business as usual.
Right.
That's what we so often do. To avoid uncomfortable truths about the prejudice that still infects our society. To settle for symbolic gestures without following up with the hard work of more lasting change. That's how we lose our way again. It would be a refutation of the forgiveness expressed by those families if we merely slipped into old habits, whereby those who disagree with us are not merely wrong but bad, where we shout instead of listen, where we barricade ourselves behind preconceived notions or well-practiced cynicism. Reverend Pinckney once said, "Across the South, we have a deep appreciation of history. We haven't always had a deep appreciation of each other's history." What is true in the South is true for America. Clementa understood that justice grows out of recognition of ourselves in each other. That my liberty depends on you being free too. That history can't be a sword to justify injustice or a shield against progress, but must be a manual for how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. How to break the cycle, a roadway toward a better world. He knew that the path of grace involves an open mind, but more importantly, an open heart. That's what I felt this week. An open heart. That, more than any particular policy or analysis, is what's called upon right now, I think. What a friend of mine, the writer Marilyn Robinson, calls that reservoir of goodness, beyond and of another kind, that we are able to do each other in the ordinary cause of things. That reservoir of goodness. If we can find that grace, anything is possible. If we can tap that grace, everything can change. Continue to shed his grace on the United States of America.
Well, the doors of the church are open, right? What do you guys think?
I'm still as speechless now as I was in the sanctuary, in the church. I mean, it was an arena, but it became a church for so many of us. And I think what made the most sense for me is I was so shocked at the victims' families' response to the shooter of forgiveness, and I realized that they hold their faith to deal with the grief. And it just was... I mean, I almost feel like crying again.
I know. And they set the bar really high for the president today, right? To come in here and do that.
We did. We did. African Americans throughout this country, those people who wanted to see him give this speech for so long, we set that bar high. And not only did he hit that bar, he exceeded it. It did my heart so much joy. Actually, I had dinner here in town and was able to talk to the proprietor of the restaurant, who's a staunch Republican. He said, "I'm not a fan of our president too much." He said, but today it made me proud to be an American.
Yeah.
And I just thought that spoke so highly of the moment that we were in.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we talked earlier about being guarded. Yeah. The president is so guarded. There was fear. You like, oh my God, this is going to be received. So let's not be guarded. This was church.
Yeah.
I thought I was waiting for somebody to shout and run up and down the aisle.